Some kind of unfinished business from yesterday's show when we talked about the ongoing shameful performance of Her Majesty's Constabulary with respect to so-called grooming gangs still operating with impunity everywhere from inner-city Tower Hamlets to the leafy lanes of Warwickshire. We're going to stay on this story because the abandonment of vulnerable girls by the state and all its agencies is a national disgrace. But in the course of yesterday's interview with Maggie Oliver, I threw in, as an aside, what ought to be a shocking statistic that only 6% of crimes in England and Wales result in a charge. So crime does pay because you've got a 94% chance of getting away with it. That statistic alone should be enough to get you wondering why we even bother having a police force. I mean, would you accept that rate of success in any other area of life? If you had, say, a gardener who only mowed 6% of your lawn, or a plumber who only unblocked 6% of your pipe, you'd soon be musing over the breakfast table, I don't know, darling, what with the return of inflation and the business going under during the COVID, does it really make sense to throw money at the 6% gardener? Or do you think we should give him even more resources and he might be amenable to mowing 9% of the lawn? However, it's not just that if you're a 13-year-old girl being farmed out for gang rape every night, the British police are merely useless. They're also, to the general population, an objective threat to core liberties. To reprise my old line, Britain is the land where everything is policed except crime. Nicola Murray runs Brodie's Trust, which supports women who have lost unborn babies to domestic violence, a terrible thing. She announced on Twitter that she would no longer refer women to the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre, which Ms Murray feels prioritises trans activism over the needs of rape victims. She might be correct, she might not, but that's the judgment she's reached with respect to her own business. Next thing she knows, Police Scotland are knocking on her door because, quote, we need to speak to you to ascertain what your thinking was. Real crime is too much like hard work for Scottish policemen, so it's easier for Police Scotland's third-rate time-serving nincompoops to investigate thought crime. No constable has any business demanding of the public that he needs to, quote, ascertain what your thinking is. If any police officer says such a thing to you, send him away with a flea in his ear and tell him he shames the legacy of Sir Robert Peel and is unfit to be a policeman, which he is. Who are these officers? And which over-promoted twit back at Police Scotland HQ dispatched them to Ms Murray's house? Because actually, we need to ascertain what the hell they were thinking. Yesterday, I mentioned en passant West Yorkshire Police, who have launched a so-called catcall squad in which plainclothes female officers go undercover as dolly birds, and if some bloke yells from his white van, "Whoa, don't get many of them to the pound, love," then they ticket him. A sample tweet targeting people who are shouting things from their vehicles at women, girls. This will not be tolerated. The occupant of this vehicle shouted at undercover female officers, reported for breach of PSPO. That's a public space protection order. And there you can see 3 gallant policemen defending the undercover female officer's honour by targeting the ne'er-do-well in his van. This is West Yorkshire, where the largest grooming gang to date, there'll be another one along any minute, the largest grooming gang to date in the UK, had the run of Huddersfield for a decade. Priorities, priorities. In fairness, a West Yorkshire street does have actual physical reality. Increasingly, the police prefer to police Cyberland, the Twitterscape, Instagramistan. This week, they secured the conviction of a 36-year-old Glaswegian called Joseph Kelly for a, quote, grossly offensive tweet. Is there any other kind of tweet? Do you know how many grossly offensive tweets are tweeted every minute of the day? This should keep the coppers in undemanding leisurely employment for decades. In the case of Mr. Kelly, he was sneering at the death of the otherwise universally beloved Captain Tom. As you remember, Sir Tom Moore died a year ago at the age of 100, and Kelly tweeting anonymously as Sair Alba, which means Free Scotland in Gaelic, like the Sair Sturt Éireann, the Irish Free State. So under his nom de tweet, Joseph Kelly responded to the death of Captain Tom as follows: "The only good Brit soldier is a dead one. Burn, old fella, burn." It used to be a basic principle of law that you couldn't libel the dead, but apparently you can on Twitter. I hold no brief for Mr. Kelly. If he said such a thing to my face, I'd invite him to step outside, as I hope many of you would too. Instead, Joseph Kelly was convicted under Section 127 of the Communications Act 2003. That's Tony Blair's baby. Section 127 has also ensnared feminists who misgender trans activists, and a 20-year-old builder who was fined £545 for drawing two penises on a picture of a policeman who was interviewing him at the time and then Snapchatting the picture. A policeman is not the wall of a pub toilet. You can't just cover him in penises. So the officer immediately confiscated the telephone, saw the picture, kept the mobile as, quote, evidence, and insisted the case go to court, where the ne'er-do-well had to cough up £272.50 per penis. That's a lot of money for a penis, especially in contemporary Britain. This would be a joke were not that it has horrible real-world consequences for the victims of actual crime, who get to leave a message on the state-of-the-art central call centre on Rockall and then wait in vain for a call back. Every penile portraitist, every offensive tweeter, every West Yorkshire wolf whistler, every misgenderer comes at the cost of real investigation of real crimes. And oddly enough, this eggshell sensitivity to no-name loser tweeters in their bedsits comes at a time when the state slanders its own citizenry routinely, from school teachers insisting that all white people are racist, including, yes, you, Janet and John, in the second row, including your mum and dad, all the way up to prime ministers. Here's how Canada's blackface PM sums up those heroic Canadian truckers we've talked about these last couple of weeks. Quote, today in the House, members of Parliament unanimously condemned the anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-black racism, homophobia and transphobia that we've seen on display in Ottawa over the past number of days. Together, let's keep working to make Canada more inclusive. So it's inclusive for the head of government to damn tens of thousands of his fellow citizens as racists and Islamophobes, but it's a criminal offence for some no-name loser to misgender somebody. Gee, it's almost like the rulers live by an entirely different set of rules. Free societies do not do this. We are witnessing the self-destruction of British policing and a sinister morphing into thought commissars in which they sit around the office reading tweets all day long rather than do anything about the serial gang rape of Britain's children.